Hi students, just wanted to go over a couple of decimal, percent, and fraction problems so that if you need extra practice, you can get it at home before coming to class. This first problem says at Speedy Sports, 20% of the merchandise is related to football. Write 20% as a fraction and write 20% as a decimal. So to write this as a fraction, what you should know is that when you're using percent, your whole is always 100%. The whole is always 100%. Okay, so to write a fraction, you could say that it's 20% that's related to football over 100%. Okay, that would be the fraction answer. But if you want to make it in the simplest form, meaning it's the same amount, but it's just a smaller number, you can always reduce it by the common factor. And the greatest common factor that is in 20 and 100 is 20, because 20 can go into 100. So if we divide both the top and the bottom by 20, that would equal 20 divided by 20 is 1. And then 100 divided by 20 is 5. Okay, so the simplest form would be 1 out of 5. Both mean 20%. Then we need to write 20% as a decimal. So we can just do our trick using Miss Beyonce's song, okay? Here is the percent sign. All right, so all I have to do is move the percent sign to the left, okay? So to the left, and then we put our decimal point and take out the percent. So then our decimal would be 2.20 or 0.20 or 0.2, okay? You can write it those 3 ways. So if 20% is the number, then 20 over 100 would be a fraction, and 0.20 would be its decimal. Let's go to the next problem. This says, Emmett has a sore throat, so his mom takes him to the doctor. The doctor tells Emmett to take 1 out of 2, or 1 over 2 of a tablespoon of medicine every day for the next week. So first, it's asking you to write the tablespoon amount as a decimal. And the second thing it wants is to write it as a percent. The number one way to change a fraction into a decimal or a percent is to make an equivalent fraction with 100 as the denominator. All right, so I always do, if my denominator isn't 100 right out the gate, right at the beginning, I'm going to make an equivalent fraction with the denominator 100, okay? So then I just have to do something that we're used to since the beginning of the school year. From 2 to 100, I'm going to be multiplying, and 2 times what gives me 100? 2 times 50. Okay, and whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So 1 times 50 gives me 50. All right, so now I have a fraction that is out of 100, which is much easier to use. Is 50 over 100 as a decimal? In 50 over 100 as a decimal, what you have to do is think about our place value chart, okay? If I were to do my ones and then my decimal point and then my tenths, okay? Remember, that's my tenths, and this is my hundredths, Okay? Well, 50 over 100 is the same thing as saying 5 over 10. So I can write my decimal point right here. I don't have a hole. My 5 in my tenths spot, because it's like 5/10, and then nothing in here. Okay? Then my answer would be 0.50. All right? Another way to look at it and make it a decimal would be to just notice that my denominator is 100 and my top number has 2 digits in it. So I can just write those 2 digits right after my decimal point. Okay? That's another way to do it. If my denominator is 100 and my top number has 2 digits, then I can just write it right behind the decimal point. Okay? Then to make a percent, again, if my denominator is 100, my percent is going to be the same number that's written on top, 50%. Okay? So then 1 out of 2, or 50 out of 100, would become 0.50 or 50%. This one is one of my favorite tricky ones, okay? This is one that might be a little hard at first, but we have a lot of good strategies. People with green eyes make up 2% of the world's population. Write 2% as a fraction and write 2% as a decimal. Okay? So the first thing that I'm going to do is my fraction. Okay? Fractions from percents is really easy because remember, when we work with percents, we know that our whole is always 100%. So to make a fraction, we would just write 2 out of 100%. Okay? So that would be the fraction. If you wanted to make it its most simple form, the greatest common factor is 2 because 2 can go into both 2 and 100. So if you divided both by 2, that would equal 2 divided by 2 is 1, 100 divided by 2 is 50. So the most simplified version of that is going to be 1 out of 50. All right, now we need to do 2% as decimal. And again, we can call on our bestie, Beyonce, to solve this. First, you see that there's a percent sign. So you're going to be going to the left. All right, we go to the left twice, no matter how many digits we see. So we go to the left, all right? And then we put our decimal point and we take out our percent. So now I have decimal point blank 2. I cannot have a blank in a decimal, all right? So instead of having a blank, if there's no number there, my value is 0. So I just put a 0. So then my decimal answer is 0.02, okay? Anytime your percent is 1 digit, you're going to have a 0 in front of it to make a decimal. Let's do just a couple more. All right, a sheet of paper is about 1 out of 10 of a millimeter thick, or 1/10 of a millimeter thick, okay? That is not very thick. If you've ever seen a piece of paper before, this is 1/10 of a millimeter, all right? So first they want it as a decimal, all right? Well, I'm going to use my trick again. 1 out of 10, my denominator isn't 100, so I'm going to make it out of 100, all right? Then I'm going to do my math, and 10 times what gives me 100? 10 times 10 gives me 100. All right. Whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. And 1 times 10 gives me 10. So now I'm working with a fraction that is going to be a lot easier to change into a decimal and a percent. Okay? For a decimal, you can see that your denominator is 100. So all you have to do, because you have 2 digits on top, is just write exactly what you see behind the decimal. So this decimal would be 0.10. All right. If you wanted to think about our place value chart, okay, the ones and then the decimal place, and then the tenths and the hundredths, tiny, tiny, tiny. All right. Then I would see that I have 1/10 in my original problem, or 10 out of 100 in my new problem. So then I could just write 1/10 in the tenths place. Don't forget your decimal point. And then 0 in the hundredths place. So I have 0.10. Then to make 1 out of 10, or as we know, the equivalent fraction is 10 out of 100, as a percent, because I have 100 as my denominator, I can just write the top number exactly as I see it. So that means that it would be 10%, okay? So 1 out of 10 is the same as 0.10 and 10%, okay? We're going to do one last problem, and hopefully it's going to help you. Let me see which one's my favorite. All right, I like this one. Aubrey is helping her dad build a doghouse. They use plywood that is 3 out of 4, or 3/4 of an inch thick. Write 3/4 as a decimal. Write 3/4 as a percent. Okay. Hopefully you've memorized what 3/4 would be as a decimal and a percent, okay? Because we introduced the fourths like quarters, because there are 4 quarters in a dollar. Just in case you don't remember it though. 3 out of 4. My denominator isn't 100, so I'm going to change it to 100 and find my numerator. 4 to 100, I just said that there are 4 quarters in a dollar. 4 times, and a quarter is worth 25 equals 100. So I do that to the top. And 3 times 25, 3 times 25 equals 75. So then I just have to now change it into a decimal. And if I have 100 as my denominator, y'all going to get bored of me saying this, I can write the 2 digits. If I have 2 digits as the numerator, I can write those 2 digits right behind a decimal point. Okay? Now we can do percents. 75 over 100. Since my denominator is 100, I know that I can just write 75 as my percentage. Okay? So 3/4 is the same as 0.75 and 75%. I hope that this is helping y'all understand the steps that you should do to change to change decimals, percents, and fractions into each other.